Just a reminder to our Speculating Wildly About Crime listeners, this is for entertainment purposes only and solely the thoughts and opinions of our team. We do invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to Speculating Wildly About Crime. Today we're going to be doing something a little different. We're going to start off by telling you a case. We're going to do some speculation, and then we will actually have the daughter of our victim, Stephanie, on to talk to us about the case. First, I would like to extend a very warm thank you to Nikki. This is the first time we've been able to have a victim's relative come on and speak with us, and hopefully this is just another drop in the bucket towards getting her mother justice. We're actually going to start off with the 911 call. The 911 call is just going to be 1 minute long, so if you would like to fast forward, hit the fast forward button a couple times and you should be good.
911, what's your emergency?
I need help.
What kind of help?
There has been a very bad accident.
Where at?
It's 530 Coffee Pot Drive. In Sedona.
Okay, how many vehicles?
No, there's no vehicles. Me and my wife, we were in an argument, and she's hurt. She's hurt very bad. I need help.
Okay, what's wrong with her?
She's been shot.
She was shot?
Yes.
Who shot her?
We were... I don't know.
You don't know who shot her?
She might have shot herself.
So that call was placed by her significant other, Russell. Let's go back to earlier in the night. Stephanie got off of work as a pastry chef at about 5 p.m. and she went home. She had a few drinks and she ended up talking to her ex, which was her oldest daughter, Nikki's father. By 11 p.m., Nikki went up to her mother, Stephanie, who was sitting on the couch, wrapped her arms around her mother, gave her a hug and a kiss, and said goodnight. But this was the last time that Nikki would see her mother alive. So we'll pick up with Russell's side of the story. He got home after 11 o'clock. Him and Stephanie worked at the same restaurant together. She was the pastry chef. He was a head chef. He took a shower. He went into the living room and shared a bottle of wine with Stephanie. He told Stephanie that he was accepted into a culinary program in New York, and they live in Arizona. So the program was 2 weeks long, and he had already purchased his plane ticket, and this really upset Stephanie. So he states that she goes into the bedroom. She comes back to the living room with a gun. So she goes to shoot Russell, but she misses and ends up shooting the wall in the living room. So she leaves and goes into the bedroom. Russell follows her, and one more shot is fired, and Stephanie was killed. By 1:40 a.m., Russell calls the police. 3 police officers arrive on the scene. They announce themselves and they go in the house. Peterson is in the hallway and he's holding a telephone up to his ear. His right hand is covered in blood. The police walked through the house. They went into the bedroom where Stephanie was, and she was at the foot of the bed. However, most notably, there was another person on the bed right next to Stephanie, their 4-year-old daughter, Christina, and she was saying, "That's my mommy." The gun was also laying beside Stephanie. At that point, one of the police officers told another officer to remove Christina and Russell to the living room. Once in the living room, Russell notified police that the 10-year-old child, Nikki, was still asleep in bed. They went to go get Nikki up from bed. 2 police officers did stay with Stephanie, but they could not find a pulse on her. At that time, they told Russell that she was dead, but they did not tell the children. One notable thing was Russell said he had moved the gun. During the interview, Peterson said he did not call 911 right away, and It wasn't until after he decided to put the gun back. He said, I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to be accused of murder or of anything like that. I picked up the gun, I put it in the holster, I put it back in the closet. I brought it back down and I said, no, that's stupid. It's happened. There's nothing you can do about it at this point. And I set it back there on the ground and you guys came. Later, Nikki says she had no idea her mother was dead until her sister shouted to her, quote, Poppy killed mommy. And she kept repeating it. The three of the victim's family were taken to the police station to talk to detectives. By 3:35 in the morning, a representative from Child Protective Services had arrived to help find care for the children. And at 4:20 a.m., Russell agreed to let the girls go to a temporary foster family to let them sleep. He was hesitant at first, but once they assured him, we just want to make sure the girls are taken care of, then he did agree. So during that time, Russell contacts a coworker that both he and Stephanie share named Peter Korn. So Korn comes to the station and talks with Russell, shared his contact information with investigators, and once Korn left the station, he had 2 phone calls with investigators. During these phone calls, he mentions that Stephanie had been distraught and upset at work for the prior days. He thought it was due to the 10-day trip that was upcoming to New York that Russell was going to take, and she was not happy about it. He also made a point to say that he didn't want to, quote, badmouth Stephanie. However, he did go on to talk about how she was always the one to cause problems in their relationship. He indicated that it would be more likely that Stephanie would end her own life before Russell would kill her. Also, according to Korn, Stephanie would regularly complain about her, quote, miserable life and her home problems. They did want to search the house, obviously, and Russell gave them consent. Investigators found on the exterior of the home the bullet hole and bullet jacket from the first shot that was fired. When they entered the home, they found the bullet hole from inside as well, so that matches up with at least one shot being fired from the living room. They also noticed a glass of beer on a couch side table and a glass of wine on the coffee table. Some things that I would like to note, Russell's mom had called the police station that morning to verify that Stephanie was in fact dead, as Russell had called his father earlier, and his father told his mother the news, and I believe they were separated. This is interesting because according to Nikki in recent interviews, she was able to obtain an unredacted report that Russell had called his father before he had called 911. I also wanted to talk about the gun. So the gun was a Ruger Red Hawk 44 Magnum revolver. It comes in various barrel lengths, but it can be upwards of a 3-pound revolver.
Can you show us, Dana? You know we're not very good with guns, so can you kind of...
The barrel lengths can go anywhere from 8 inches to 3 inches, and the shorter the barrel length, the bigger the kickback is. So it's a big, heavy gun, I guess is really the only way to describe it. It's a handgun. And so the old Westerns that have the 6-shot revolver on it, it's like that, but the barrel length can vary. Also, Stephanie didn't usually or ever handle that gun. She really was not proficient with it. The barrel length part can be much longer too, but that's the general gist.
You did a good job describing.
At the time, police did interview Christina. Now, mind you, she is very little. Through questioning, she said that she saw her mother be killed. However, through more questioning, She did not see her mother actually physically be shot, but she saw her mother on the floor, on the foot of the bed, and she saw her father pull the gun out of the closet. So she was there when her father put the gun back by her. So that's why she was reiterating to police that she did see her mother get killed. But again, I should note that she did not see the actual shooting happen. She was still asleep at that point.
Do you know
So
this 100% why?
through the questioning, they kept asking her, "What did you see?" But she did end up saying, "No, I was asleep when he shot her, but she's dead. Dad shot mom."
Gotcha. Okay.
Russell does tell police that they were in the bedroom after the first shot and they struggled over the gun before it went off. He will, I believe it was 2 days later, change the story and say that there was no struggle and she just gone into the bedroom and had shot herself. Also, during the interview, he asked to call an attorney at one point, but rather than calling an attorney, he called his father and the manager of the restaurant that he and Stephanie had worked at. Now, I found this quite interesting because the manager of the restaurant actually was pretty upset that police had not interviewed him yet because he felt like he was a key person that should be interviewed because he was the manager of this restaurant and he knew both Stephanie and Russell. And the police essentially told him, "If we need to interview you, we will get a hold of you." Some notable things from the autopsy. I had mentioned that Stephanie had been drinking that night. She did have a blood alcohol level of 0.17, which is over twice the legal limit to drive. Her left palm was positive for gunpowder residue. Her right hand was negative for gunpowder residue. Her left neck was negative as well, and that is where she had been shot. She was shot through the neck and severed her spinal cord. Is more consistent with a defensive posture than that with a self-inflicted injury. So that would probably mean that she held her left hand up to protect herself from the firing gun. And according to the pathologist, the manner of death is homicide.
And do we know if she was right-handed or left-handed?
She was right-handed. This is relevant because she was shot on her left side. Interviews took place, and the medical examiner ruled the death as a homicide, but no arrests were made. They felt they just didn't have enough. The only witnesses to the death were Russell and Stephanie, and she's the victim. The death of Stephanie was in 1993, and in 2020, Stephanie's family worked very hard to get police attention back on this case. I also want to note that the case was not closed because the cause of death was homicide.
If the case wasn't closed, it's still an open case, it's a cold case. So I'm just curious how we know so many things and why things weren't sealed.
Could the case have been closed but then reopened in 2020? So during the time that it was closed is when these reports were released, but then reopened in 2020 would hinder anything else being released?
From the research I found, which could be wrong and would be a great question to ask Nikki, is that it was cold and not closed. The police report that I've read, that was released to Nikki in 2021, which is after the case had been reopened. And it is a redacted file.
So if on the 911 call, Russell said it was either me or her, but then it was ruled a homicide, not a suicide, how does that track?
So the medical examiner, part of what he found was usually with a suicide, they have gunpowder residue or like a contact mark on them because it's right up against their skin. And Stephanie didn't have that. And as Jamie sniffed out right away, she was right-handed. So to have a large, heavy gun in a non-dominant hand, or on the far side, like reaching around yourself, it just didn't make sense. From what I've researched, the police is at this point saying, we have the medical examiner's report, but that's all we have. Only eyewitness testimony is somebody who's changing their story. And he's changed his story to say that she did shoot herself. So the police didn't have enough that they could get a conviction. So they don't.
If she did take that first shot, why would she do it in the house where her daughters were sleeping?
I can see where it would go that way because I think if you have alcohol involved, along with you're in a heated argument, you get blinders on, right?
But if you are not a regular shooter, which it sounds like she was not, I sure wouldn't take that chance.
It sounded like even he was not taking her serious, that she was just trying to scare him, is what he believed. He didn't believe that he was actually going to shoot him.
All we know is what he is telling us. We have a 3-year-old who is in bed and a 10-year-old who is in bed. We don't know the conversations that happened before for her to even want to pull a trigger, whether it's to scare you or if she's a bad egg.
He states that he moved the gun and then moved it back next to his youngest child sitting next to Stephanie. Maybe this has nothing to do with the case, but that is a serious character flaw. I would say I moved the gun so that my child could not get a hold of it, not to put it right in front of her. It sounds like she was making plans to leave him. Is that correct?
Yes. From interviews that I've listened to Nikki, she was having plans to leave him. Stephanie was on the phone with her ex, Nikki's father, earlier in the day, and that was the conversation that Stephanie was having with her ex. Was she was trying to figure out how to get herself and the children out of the home. And
if this is me and this person who I want to leave and I'm just trying to get my plan together says I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks, I would be like, yes, this is it. This is the time. This is perfect. So his story was that she got so mad at him, and that's how this argument started because he was going to be gone for 2 weeks. But that seems like it works out in her favor.
That
Like,
would have been the perfect escape.
that is a sign. This is the time. So do we really think that's what started this argument?
the coworker was like, ugh, Stephanie's such a drag. All she does is complain about her miserable life at home. He would never do this. And they took it as, it's because of you. And it couldn't possibly be because you're treated like crap.
She could have just been having a bad day and she
Yeah.
could have just been saying something because when you were saying that, I was like, if Luke and I worked at the same place, that same perspective would probably happen.
What I wonder with the boss of the restaurant and with him degrading Stephanie and uplifting Russell is Russell was just accepted into this culinary school, right? And he's doing these 2-week things.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a fact or not, but usually in cases like this, your company is paying for that. This is to advance you with the company that you're in. Could there be a possibility of him calculating his words in a way for it to play into Russell's favor because Russell has to be a big source of income for him?
They invested into him.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. And he said twice that I don't want to badmouth Stephanie, but.
Yeah.
And I also want to throw this out there for all of the parents in our group, but you're leaving me home with a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old for 2 weeks. That's a lot of work. Because I could totally see she's annoyed being like, I am a single parent for 2 weeks. I already don't like this guy. That's really freaking annoying. And maybe they translated that into she's jealous and upset about it.
I still go back to, no, she's packing her shit.
But earlier, before she had a conversation with her ex,
Because
I
maybe
don't
she was
think this
having those
conversation.
conversations at work prior to, right? And that's where this manager's saying, oh, she was jealous and she was vindictive and this is all her fault.
But the story is that he came home and told her he was going to be gone for these 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, and he had
Oh.
already purchased plane tickets.
And that
So-
was the first time that she knew about it.
And then that changes things.
But if we remember, she had been on the phone with her ex-husband. So the statistic that I want to throw out there is 14 days within the day that you decide you're going to leave are the most dangerous.
Yeah, but
Yes.
he's going to be gone.
He was
Exactly.
choosing to be gone, not choosing for her to leave him.
So do you think maybe he spilled this news? Hey, I'm gone for 2 weeks. And she was like, that's great because I won't be here when you get back. Do you think she maybe spilled the beans?
That was one of my speculations. Was she loose-tongued
Maybe
enough
she gave up her
to say,
plan.
perfect, because I'm leaving your ass anyways. So you go for 2 weeks. I won't be here when you get back.
And it maybe was a final dig at him.
I think that makes so much sense. She totally, when you're drinking, you're like, yeah, fuck you. I don't even like you anyway. And you don't care as much and you're going to let things come out. So I think that definitely could have happened.
And something else that I had a hard time with is his side of the story is a conversation I think all of us have had. I was calmly and rationally telling her about this trip, and she can't handle her emotions.
It might have been a situation where she had been so unhappy for so long, and then she's trying to make this decision and try to figure out the logistics of it. And then he tells her this news, and that's like a weight lifted off of her shoulders, and she just couldn't keep it in and contain it.
It's almost like you get like a rush of empowerment by that kind of news.
This is a sign from the gods that
Yeah.
I am supposed to be leaving
And
this
you told the
person,
wrong person.
and you just let too much slip out, whether it was from alcohol or just again from that pressure being
rush.
lifted off of you. Had that been the case, that could have changed this whole night. That could have been the thing that turned everything on its head.
I think what you guys are saying has all made sense. Just hard to say what people will do in those situations.
Yeah, I think it's very plausible. That's potentially how it went down. That's what could have caused the argument to escalate. That if they were both drinking and she did say something along those lines of, I'm leaving. I won't be here when you get back. I could see where that could have happened, and unfortunately, she is not here to tell her side of what that conversation looked like.
It's very unfortunate. Not only is this woman now dead, but her 3-year-old child was sitting next to her mother, who, by the police reports, it was a pretty graphic crime scene. The police gave her a stuffed dog that she just held on to all night. It's things like that just make your heart go, oh, this is a little kid.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that never fully goes away.
So this hits fucking home to me because my daughter's about to be 3 and my son is 11. I just couldn't.
And in the podcast that I listened to with Nikki, they asked about her relationship with her sister after her mother was killed. And Nikki went to go live with her father, and Christina stayed with her father as well. They were separated, and she didn't see her sister again until a year later. And Christina, who's now 4 or 5 at the time, said, Poppy didn't kill Mommy. Mommy killed herself.
Because that's a narrative that's been
Yes.
drilled into her, and you can't fault her for that.
No, not at all. But now here we are 17 plus years later, and when they opened this case back up, they wanted to talk to her because she's really like the only witness, if you will, now. And she initially agreed, and then she disappeared. At this point, Nikki does not know where her sister is. But with that said, how your memory changes from when you were 3 and with how it is altered to either make sense for you or if someone's been telling you something different for all these years, I don't know what that interview with the police would look like.
You got a point, because how many times have we said, oh, I remember that happened to me, but then as you get older, you're like, but did I remember it? Or was it because the story was always told to me? Or is it because I always saw the pictures, right?
And maybe she doesn't even trust herself to be able to give a reliable account.
Yeah, that's very true.
Just fighting from her 3-year-old memory to what she's been told for all these years. I would feel a major conflict within myself. Do you know if other people that he was in relationships with that have spoken out? I'm just curious if this was a pattern.
So after Stephanie's death, he did go on to actually get married to a woman named Diane. And according to the interview that I heard from Nikki, Diane was a pretty supportive person. And she was even super nice to Nikki. And she even confided in Nikki that allegedly Russell had told Diane what he did.
And maybe I missed this, but why was the investigation reopened in 2020?
It was mostly due to Nikki and Stephanie's sister, Wendy.
Maybe I read too much into this, but I thought maybe it had a little bit to do with the fact that they got the unredacted police report and found out that he called his dad before calling 911, and that led some questioning.
I know that definitely happened. I'm just not sure which came first.
Got it.
I believe in the interview that I heard with Nikki, she had said that she knew that he had called someone before 911. She just didn't know who. And she finally found out that her grandmother had an unredacted report and found the phone number, and the phone number was his father's. The article that I read said that it was from Family Request.
I remember an interview that she did where she was saying something about this happened when she was so young that she just grew up to forget about it. And then 20 years later, something happened with her aunt that sparked the opening, and that's when she, as an adult, got active.
Yes. Again, I keep going back to it's ruled a homicide, but he said it was either me or her.
And a question I had with the phone call before 911, did his dad recommend, no, put the gun back. Take the gun out of the closet and put it back next to
That's
her.
100% what I thought.
Okay. We can get into the speculation at this point. Missy, why don't you kick us off?
I'm with Janelle. There's really limited options here on who could have been responsible for this. And every sign points to the same person, and it's not Stephanie. Obviously, we have a homicide, so let's do something about it. That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, this is, I'm sorry, easy peasy, open, closed, shut case for me. The boyfriend did it. That's whether it was like he had thought about things like that beforehand or he snapped, but I would lean more toward maybe he snapped. Like they got into a fight, but it was in that spur of the moment versus planning, maybe. But that's my thought.
Jamie?
He called his dad before he called 911.
Yes, according to Nikki's copy of the phone bill.
I had questions about the dad because, and again, we take this with a grain of salt because this was a 3-year-old at the time. But when I was listening to a couple recounts of her, I'll put in quotes, interview with the police, she kept using the words Poppy and Pappy, and it sounded like 2 different people, where one was dad and one was grandpa to me, anyways, when I was listening to it. And so then I was like, shit, was she confused? Was the dad actually there? Does she not really know who did what to her mom? And so a small part of me thought, did he happen to come over there that night because they were having a bad fight? Or did he just happen to be there because it was a normal thing and then this fight ensued? I 100% don't believe it was planned out. I 100% believe it was accident is going to sound wrong. Happenstance is probably the better word. A happenstance that if the grandpa was there and this whole thing happened, he accidentally shot her or he happenstance shot her, or my gut tells me that it really was that struggle with them in the bedroom. And he was the one who pulled the trigger, which is proof by the medical examiner's final documentation of everything, the gunpowder residue, all of that. Either way, that leads me to believe it wasn't methodical, it wasn't really thought out. But I wondered about the grandpa because if he did really call him, and the daughter, I don't know if anybody else listened to that, again, quote, interview she had with the police. I felt like she did use two words or two different names.
Yeah, we know 911 call happened at 1:40 in the morning, but that doesn't necessarily mean when she was shot.
And we don't know how far apart father and son live from each other, right?
And Nikki can probably clear that up too.
So I don't have a for sure answer, but those were just like some of the questions and things I had around it. But I guess I will for sure say, I don't think she went into the bedroom and said, but I'm also on the other spectrum of, I don't think he methodically planned this out. And I think if it happened, it was definitely like either A, spur of the moment thing, or B, we got in a fight and we're trying to take the gun from each other and fuck. And that 911 call, the way he talked definitely led me down that path where he was like, I have no idea what happened.
Cindy, what do you got?
I don't really know either. I think like a no-brainer. She did not commit suicide. Her husband shot her. And I do agree with Jamie that it probably wasn't planned, but it was spur of the moment and just happened. But otherwise, it just seems like it's too straightforward. Why is this still a problem? He should have been arrested.
So what do you think he should have been arrested for then?
Ooh, Dana with the hard questions.
So I was going to say murder, but is it premeditated or is it manslaughter? It would depend on what his story was for what he would be charged with.
And I'm sure with a case like that, it's probably like tacking on everything in the kitchen sink where it's sure it's involuntary manslaughter where we're going to throw tampering with evidence and perjury.
Child endangerment.
Child endangerment, yeah.
It was definitely perjury, right? Because he mixed his story up. He originally said this, we struggled with the gun, and now, nope, she shot herself. There's a lie somewhere.
Yeah.
Janelle?
If you take into account that she wasn't, I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but not proficient with a handgun, I think maybe she did go for the gun, but that was because she was in fear for her life in some other way. But I don't think it was just a little nitpicky argument and she escalated it to go get the gun that she didn't know how to use. That's silly to me. So again, I think if that was her last resort, I think that's plausible. But I just keep going back to, you were about to have 2 free weeks to execute your plan. Perfect timing. So I don't know if maybe he suspected something already that she was gonna leave, or she just let it out and maybe that was like the biggest mistake. I'm so curious to find out like why there were never any charges. Again, it's only 2 options and it's ruled a homicide. I don't think necessarily it was premeditated, but I definitely think that he murdered her. I think it was a heat of the moment. Things just escalated really quickly, and this man has just gone on to live his life with no repercussions when it was ruled a homicide.
Carolina,
With the information that we have and what we know, I don't think that if it was murder, that it was premeditated in a way that he had been planning it for an extensive period of time. Could it have been premeditated in the way that he decided in that 1 minute, I'm gonna go get the gun and I'm going to kill her? That's more possible, I think. I'm having a very difficult time reconciling the fact that the medical examiner, in reviewing the case, doing the autopsy, has concluded 100% this was homicide. The police did investigate it, however, there's been no arrests. So I feel like this is due for a more thorough investigation, because that is going to be the only way that there is actually going to be a chance for this to have some level of conclusion and for potentially justice to be had in this case. And it's just so terrible what this family with Nikki, her sister, has had to go through with this whole process, and it needs to be investigated further.
David?
What I think is that we don't know when the gunshots were fired. We don't know if Stephanie fired a gunshot and missed Russell, but what we do know is the gun was moved. So it makes me question, could the gun have been moved to go fire a random shot through the wall in the living room to collaborate a story? I'm heartbroken for the children. What I think is very important that we need to remember is even Nikki, who is being very vocal, has said that she does not believe this man is a killer. She does not believe that other people are in jeopardy of their lives. What I personally think is Stephanie was working on her escape plan. She then gets informed of the news that current boyfriend is leaving for 2 weeks, which could halt that escape plan because we don't know where the children fell in that escape plan because there's 2 different fathers. There's wine involved, there's emotion involved. I don't think that Russell reached out with the intent to kill.
So I'll wrap up here with my own thoughts. I do think this was, not to boil it down to just a horrible night, but I think a lot of trains were converging at one station in one night, fueled by alcohol, fueled by emotions, fueled by just exasperation for where you're at on both sides. And I guess the reason I had asked Cindy of what do you think he should be charged with is mainly because I'm curious too. I'm not law enforcement, I'm not an attorney, so I don't know what the ins and outs are. But I could see for Nikki and the family, they want justice. Does that mean life in prison without the possibility of parole? Or does it mean you have your day in court and you spend time in prison because you, whether intent or non-intent, but my mother's gone. She's not coming back. Both of those girls had to grow up much differently than they probably would have if their mom was still here with us. So I would be curious what Nikki's perspective is on what kind of outcome, if it's justice or if it's punishment, what they want for their family. If it's the truth, that sounds like justice. I don't know what that looks like personally, but what I can tell you is that coming up, we've got our interview with Nikki, and she will help us with our speculating wildly about crime. Before we get started with some of our questions, would you be willing to give a brief summary of your mother's and your family's story?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I want to thank you guys for doing this for me. I've done a podcast with David already, so I'm already comfortable with David. But as like you start to introduce like your second, your third, your fourth, your fifth, I got a little overwhelmed and I clammed up a little in the beginning, but when the camera's rolling, I'll loosen up. So thank you for having me. I am very grateful to have a group of this many banter with me. So this is going to be quite the experience for me. Now, as for what happened and why I'm even here talking to you today is when I was 10 years old, I went to bed not knowing it was going to be the last time I'd ever see my mom. 3 hours later, after I lay my head down on the pillow, the Sedona Police Department will wake me up and escort me from my home. Again, I don't know my mom is deceased at this moment. They will tell me that she got into a fight with her boyfriend, and I will see her boyfriend on the couch as they escort me through very quickly, and he's got blood on his hands, and they'll put me in the back of the squad car where my little sister is, and she's saying, "Poppy killed mommy," and I'm older, and the policeman just told me that my mom got into a fight, and I believed it, so I remember trying to reason with her, and the minutes just don't mean anything to me. At that time, I could have been in there for 2 minutes trying to talk to her. It could have been hours. I think it was about 20 minutes that I was talking to her about it, trying to say, "Mom's just here, don't say that." I couldn't believe that she was repeating that. I remember that very vividly 30 years later. And the next thing I remember that stuns me as an adult when I think back on it today is, despite that there were multiple police cars on scene at this point, the Sedona Police Department will choose to put the suspect, my mother's murder, because it was domestic violence homicide, in the same car with the children, giving him the opportunity to whisper things in my ear like he was sorry. And that's when I knew that something was wrong. It wasn't when the police woke me up or when my sister said Poppy killed mommy. It was when he started getting really emotional and saying stuff to me like that, because he never did that. And they will take us to the police station and then to foster care. And several days later, they'll have Russell Peterson deliver the news that my mother is no longer with us. And 30 years will go by and there will be no movement on my mom's case, and I will have to grow up and be an adult older than she ever made it in life and start to shake some trees. And it's been 2 years since I publicly put my investigation online for you to binge watch and experience with me to see what I'm going through. And this is where we are today in January of 2024, a daughter still fighting for justice almost 31 years later. And that's my story in a nutshell.
That's incredible. That might not be an appropriate word, but I think it encapsulates so many different emotions. And something that I don't recall reading was that you found out days later that your mother had been killed.
I remember being in foster care, and yeah, it was at least 24 hours the next day. The police will just tell me and I'll believe it. I'll know something was wrong, but yeah.
Did they know if your mom actually fired a gun, or if it was just something that maybe Russell staged to look like she may have?
So I have the autopsy report that states by a medical examiner, Philip Keene, that my mother was murdered and that her hands were up in defense, and the gunpowder residue present on her left hand was because she was in a defensive posture. She had her hands up when the gun went off. And that's what they will state. And it'll be, there are 6 manners of death that the medical examiner has the option of choosing. Instead of homicide, he could have chosen suicide, accident, or undetermined. He has to go to court for this. He had to stand by his decision so much to go to a court. He was willing to stand by homicide. And yet, have you ever heard of a police department and a county attorney going against the medical examiner's findings and just running with what the suspect's saying? It blows my mind as an adult reading my mom's case file 28 years later. Just the police misconduct blows my mind, and how he just got away with murder just because they let him.
Russell said that she had fired a gun at him in the beginning. Had she ever had any familiarity with guns? Would she even know what to do? I wouldn't.
Yeah, no, she wasn't one of those that enjoyed to go target practicing shooting at all. She liked to cook and bake. So if you ask my dad, who had more guns than Russell Peterson, she would sit in the car if they would go target shooting. No, she wasn't known to do that. There's even a story that I just recently found out from one of my mom's closest friends, because when they were growing up in their teens and 20s and having babies together, their boyfriends were friends. So at one point, Lori Swift's boyfriend and my dad used to shoot guns together. And at one point, she had asked Lori or Lori had asked my mom, could you please return this gun to Craig? And my mom refused to transport the weapon because I was in the car. And I just recently found that out. And I just think that's really endearing and a testament to my mother's love for me. And his story claims it's just so ridiculous that she shot at him. And that means that she would have shot towards my bedroom. And I just know it's not true.
Yeah, that.
What we were thinking as well. That
And from the research that I was able to find, this was a large gun, and your mother was a fairly petite woman. Is that correct, both of those statements?
Yes, I had to do the same thing. Like, researching my own mother's murder has been nuts the last 2 years. But yeah, I know nothing about weapons, but when researching it, it's a 44 Magnum Ruger Red Hawk. It's 13 inches from barrel to handle, 7 inches just the barrel, 3 pounds in weight. Just a man to shoot it, you got to have 2 hands on it. The kickback is incredible. It's a bare defense gun. The list, it goes on. And not only that, but it was loaded with hollow point bullets. I don't know if you knew that. My mom was 138 pounds at the time of autopsy with a 0.17 blood alcohol. She was drunk. And they expect me to believe that she shot off not 1, but 2 shots with an undominant left hand. And that's, again, against the medical examiner's findings. It's just ridiculous why we have to even talk about that. Any responsible gun owner will hear this story and know it's Boulder Dash.
So that
Yes.
brings up a good point that I don't think we even thought about, but to piggyback off Cindy's question, so you said there was no gunpowder residue on her right hand at all. So it would have been nearly impossible for her to have fired that shot at Russell that he claimed in the living room, right? I don't know if a gunpowder residue could have went away during a struggle or what, but
that's not what the medical examiner said, but that's what the suspect is claiming. And that's what he wants you to believe, that the left hand theory is possible because the gunpowder residue is present there, that it could be possible, but it's not possible. It really isn't. A 138 pound, what was she, 5'7", drunken woman with just a left hand. Come on.
And something I heard in another podcast from you, Nikki, and I loved this point personally, so I wanted to bring it up here. But there's nothing wrong with having that blood alcohol level in your own home when you're not planning on driving after kind of a crappy day at work. So I wanted to throw that out there. I'm sure everybody here has, if we tested our blood alcohol at home on a Friday night, would be like, oh, maybe it's not as hard to get there as I thought. So
thank you.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention too that the gun was loaded, right? So obviously not a very responsible gun owner with 2 kids in the house to have a loaded gun anywhere in the house.
Correct. Not in a safe, easily accessible on the top shelf of a closet. Correct.
You had said that you have been reviewing your mom's case file and you've seen the medical examiner's report. I can't even imagine what an emotional journey that has been for you to go through all of that. Can you talk about that process a little bit, about how you gained access to her case file? Was it considered a closed case when you got those files?
It has been an ongoing saga, girl. I requested the case file in December of 2020. They made me go through the county records, signing the paperwork to get it released to me, a controlled document. They explained to me that it was going to be redacted. No problem. Do what you got to do. It takes them 3 weeks to go through the case file and then send me, are you ready for it? 176 pages. Now, at the time, I wasn't aware that it was an incomplete case file until I read the Red Rock News article closer and I started collaborating with my Aunt Wendy. And I realized that the Red Rock News is reporting, this is in the newspaper, that the Red Rock News is reporting that my mom's case file is 400 pages. And then when I get to my aunt's house and we start comparing case files, she's got 250 pages. So I've got 176, my aunt's got 250, the Red Rock News and the cops have 400. Where's the rest of my pages? In my case file, I got my autopsy report is 6 pages. In reality, my mother's autopsy report is 10. And they were missing the final summary, which states that her hands were up in defense. I don't know if they're purposely denying me this paperwork or if it's just because it's old and the papers have slipped through the cracks throughout the years. Regardless, it's been frustrating to get the paperwork, and I'm still in process with them to try to get. They want me to pay. Every time I request to get a new case file, they want me to pay now to get the paperwork released. I refuse to give them any money. So I just had Sarah Turney do a FOIA. She's paying for it. We'll see if it's newest round of paperwork, if I get anything new, if I'm going to complete one.
That was one of my questions I was going to ask, because if you are in touch with their attorney? Because obviously she's had similar things with her dad and her sister.
So I don't know if you knew it, but I know her personally. Before she did all this, we waited tables together. And when I started my quest, I wasn't even aware that she had done hers. And it was a mutual friend of ours. And because I had already gotten the case file, gone through, committed to this. And it was December of 2021 when I had a friend tell me, did you contact Sarah? I'd already had reporters tell me the name had clicked, but it wasn't until a mutual friend of ours that had worked together at the restaurant told me, you remember her. She waited tables with us. And I remember her. She wasn't a lifer. She wasn't there for a year or two. She was in and out for the summer or something. She was not like a strong server. I remember always having to pick up, and she knew that she wasn't a strong server. When Brett told me that and I Googled her and I sat back and I remember what date it was, this changed my life. I'm so glad you asked about her because I will gush about her for the rest of my life. This is the day that changed my life, and the trajectory of my investigation was December 9th, 2021, when Brett told me to reach out to Sarah. When I sat back and Googled the girl's name that I worked with Brett, I saw what she had accomplished and I was like, I can do this. I'm going to get weepy. I could do the same fucking thing. If she could do it, she could barely even wait tables. I can do it. And I did. And I contacted her and she gave me the playbook. I didn't know that this is what you had to do as a family member of a victim, that you had to become your own this. But this is what she told me to do. Start a TikTok channel and just keep going, keep pushing, keep bringing your mom back. Like she brought her sister back, and make people care. And because of her, this is how I've gotten this far. I'm weepy. So thank you for asking. And I will forever and always commend Sarah for going out of her way and taking me under her wing. Thank you.
I'm just so proud of you. You're doing the work. You were doing the damn work. We love you.
And I'm so sorry that you have to do the work.
For real.
That's the worst part.
For real. But we all agree. You're such a badass, Nikki. You're such a badass. You shouldn't have to be doing this work, but you are. And you're bringing attention to your mother's case, and you're doing it.
I appreciate that. I film my best stuff when I'm angry, and I'm like angry 75% of my life. I swear to God. So thank you.
It just sucks that these family members say you'll get more traction if you go to TikTok and you reach out to podcasts, because why are you not getting 400 pages? Why can they not answer to you why you're not getting 400 pages? I'm so thankful that you have Sarah to help. You can lean on each other. But I don't think there needs to be a secret playbook for victims' family members as to how you can get justice for your family member. That part is quite upsetting, but I am very grateful that you do have a network under what is terrible circumstances.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of the podcast I listened to, but it was one where they like spliced in pieces of your interview throughout. The two podcast hosts read the police interview with your sister, and I was listening to that on my way to work, and I just sat in my car. The whole thing was very heart-wrenching to me in a way of, I have a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old. I cannot imagine if one of their parents were gone. And so when they sat down and had the interview with the 3-year-old, I'm envisioning my daughter, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like how fucking awful. But then I put my true crime hat on a little bit, and I was like, the 3-year-olds are a lot more honest than we give them credit for. I noticed during her interview, she used the words Poppy and Pappy. And to me, they sounded like two different people. So was he maybe there at some point?
Yeah, there was no way anybody else could have been in the home. And he called Glendale, Arizona to call his dad for advice, which is at least an hour and a half away. And Russell's Italian. He's fluent Italian. His father it's rumored that he was in the Italian mafia. So when I grew up around them, the family, and I was always instructed to call him Father Ken. I know his dad is Father Ken. That's how I grew up with him. Very thick accent. My little sister is used to calling him Poppy because of the Italian things.
That's just something that
He used to call me. I have not told any other podcast this. It'll give me the cringe olas, but I will tell you guys this. He used to call me Nicolette. I cannot stand to be called Nicolette. That is the Italian version of my name.
Yeah, we will never call you that. Please, nobody ever do. So I guess to piggyback off of that, do you have any thoughts on why you call him before you call the police, and why was that originally redacted?
It's reported that the fight started around 1:15. My family is under the impression that he had up to 25 minutes to stage the crime scene. What I can prove is that he had at least 3 minutes to stage the crime scene, because what I found in the case file is the 136 phone call, like you mentioned. It is reported that he called 911 at 1:40. He stays on the phone with operators till they arrive at 1:48. So why is he calling his father 4 minutes before for a minute? So he calls him for a minute. And then what's he doing for the 3 minutes then? What is he doing for those 3 minutes before he decides to call 911? There's hearsay because I talked to his next wife. He will apparently confess to her that he will start laundry, take another shower, make that phone call, mess with the gun, put the gun up. He even confesses to tampering with evidence in his interrogations. He's a mess. He doesn't know what to do because of what he just did. So the 136 phone call, though, was never investigated in 1993. And now they're telling me that there's really nothing they can do about it in 2023.
And I'm assuming you don't have a relationship with him any longer, the grandfather.
Unfortunately, Kenneth Peterson is now deceased.
Okay.
Another missed opportunity.
Yeah, like we hear about way too many times with this stuff. Thank you for clearing that up. If you listen to our podcast, you know that my brain goes way over here a lot.
Me too.
Do you know if he has a history of any kind of, maybe say, domestic abuse or anything like that? Or does he have a history of things with her? Do you know anything about his relationships after?
The information I can give you is about 20 years old, because he immediately after, in the 90s, by 94, 95, he's remarried and is having more children with Diane. She will immediately divorce him within a year of marrying him. After having their one child, he will go on and have another wife and have more children. But the reason why Diane Peterson is so important is because in that year, and because of the child, Vincent, their son, my sister is always connected to Diane. This is her stepmommy. This is her formative years when she's young, and she has a bond with her. So when my sister's about 14 and she runs away from Russell, and who does she run to? She runs to stepmommy, Diane Peterson, in Phoenix. I don't know where he was living at the time. Anyway, she came down to Phoenix, and that's the first time I connected with my little sister in 10 years. And now I'm in my 20s. I'm living on my own. I got my little Beetle. And I drive down there and I meet my sister for the first time, and I'm able to bond with her. But while I'm bonding with her, I create a little bit of a bond with Russell's ex-wife. And what I know is what she told me, which is hearsay, like the cops tell me, but she will tell me that Russell was a drunk and that they didn't have sex very often. They had sex right away and they got married and got pregnant. And then that was it. She said the sex diminished. And I was like, wow, that's what my mom complained about and why she was cheating on him and why she wanted to leave him. And she will say that in their time they were together, he will confess to her what he did to my mom, which is murder her and take a shower and start a load of laundry and change and make phone calls. He will confess these things to Diane Peterson. That is what I know as of 20 years ago. I know he had another wife with 2 more daughters, but I never talked to her. And I have not met anybody that's willing to come forward and tell me what they know within the last 20 years.
Do we know what he's doing currently?
Since I have so many followers, I have all you amateur sleuths looking for him. What I've been told by followers is that he's a chef at the Best Western Hotel.
I'm laughing because he had this esteemed training that.
Thank you for seeing the irony and getting that. I was not bagging out. She understands. Thank you. God bless you. He's opened restaurants that have failed. Yeah, so thank you. Yes. Let's laugh. Let's all laugh about that. Thank you.
Now, I heard in other podcasts that your sister was missing at the moment. Have you found her at all, or has the police department found her?
Oh, so my sister is in a sticky situation because the police want her to perform a confrontation call, which is why she was calling me in 2020 of July, which is how I found out they were investigating, because they thought that she was the only avenue for confession or to close this case. She agreed to do this confrontation call, and since then she's fallen off the face of the planet. You probably know that. And the Sedona Police Department has tried to get me to file missing persons so that they can try to get her involved. Now, in the last 2 years, I have not directly talked to my sister, but her daughter has reached out to me. This is why my sister stopped talking to me at the age of 16. She got pregnant. I advised her to have an abortion. She did not. She won't talk to me for another 10 years because she wanted to have Layla. Fine, all dandy. And she's a great young woman now. And she reached out to me because she's herself like 16, 17. And she saw me on the internet. And she recently reached out, and I asked her what's going on with her mother. And I know that her mother's alive. I know her mother is aware of all this, and she doesn't want to deal with this, you guys. Can you blame her? I'm publicly speaking on her life, making her famous, and she does not want to be famous nor found.
And it might not be the result that we're looking for, but I'm glad to hear that she is alive and does have connections and she is not missing.
Correct.
I believe it's your aunt has also been very involved with trying to go through the files, get the case reopened. Can you speak about that a bit?
I wouldn't even be here today if it wasn't for Aunt Wendy. My mom and my aunt were a year apart. They grew up like twins. They did everything together. And my Aunt Wendy talked to my mom for an hour or two the night of her murder. So she knows what state of mind my mom was in. She always knew that my mom was capable of this, and she never let it die. For 30 years, she kept banging on the door of the Sonoma Police Department, keeping the case alive. If it wasn't for Aunt Wendy, I wouldn't even be involved with this today. She got movement in 2020. She poked enough. She wrote, I don't know who she wrote to in 2020 to get them to investigate a little bit to try to find my sister. So I got involved, and then the Red Rock News. But she never could get it quite past the goal line because she kept going back to the people trying to silence us. She had all the great paperwork. She has all the points. She got me up to date on what I was missing in my case file, but she never was able to take it to media or get them to actually listen to her. I'm the third generation. Do you realize that? In the original case file, you could see my grandma's like notes and handwriting, and going through that and reading that broke me, sawing my grandma's curse up. And then my aunts held this torch for 30 years. And now here we are, my mother's daughter for 2 years. Like, is it ever going to end?
What does justice look like for you and your family?
Accountability. First of all, this whole notion of my mom picking up the gun and people saying that, it's just, oh my God, I just want the truth to be out there. I want the medical full autopsy report to be like printed on every newspaper in America. I want the truth to be told. I want the truth to be known. And that is really what it's going to come down to. If it was up to me, I wouldn't have him spend a day in jail if he just confessed to what he did. But unfortunately, that's not my decision. So I'll spend the rest of my life speaking on this until there's accountability.
What kind of charges would ideally a life in prison sentence be? I can't imagine you're too punitive about it, especially with your last statement about accountability.
I'm mad. I'm pissed that he's lied for this long. I know it was a crime of passion. I'm going to take my beanie off because I'm starting to sweat a little. It was a crime of passion. It was an accident. At this point, I'm more upset at the agencies that have failed her for decades, like the Sonoma Police Department and the Yavapai County's Attorney's Office, than the man that killed her in a split-second crime of passion because he was drunk, found out some news, and grabbed a gun. Like, what is this going to ultimately turn out to be? It was an accident, but when you get in a car and you hit somebody with your car, you are still liable for their murder, vehicular manslaughter, right? So in my mind, this is still manslaughter or a second-degree homicide charge of some kind. Just because you're going to say that the woman grabbed the gun first doesn't mean you're going to get away with taking her life. Sorry, no. We are going to prove it. Some reenactments will prove it. You just got to put a little bit of money behind it. And apparently, Sonoma Police Department doesn't think my mom's worth the investigation or the money, but I'm going to make them think it, and they're going to know it here pretty soon.
Absolutely. I was commenting to David the other day. I was like, he's so passionate about this too, that as we were talking about the case, I could see him like just about jumping out of his seat being like, and another thing. So I hope you know, Nikki, that there are people here that are pissed off with you and for you.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm pissed off right now too.
I'm gonna get Missy a beanie.
Oh yeah, give me the beanie. Well, I'm mad now too.
This has got to go to St. Louis with me next month. This is staying with me. It's going to keep my head warm.
What can people who are also feeling pissed off do to help you? Obviously, spread the word, right? And share the story and continue to do that. But what else can we do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, keep speaking on it, keep following, keep boosting, keep everything. But for the most part, sign the petition. I used to have it linked on my TikTok page to get the petition to be presented in front of a grand jury, a complete case file. But right now, the link is replaced with, are you ready for it? The crowdfunding link. So I'm currently funding to get the true crime film crew here to Phoenix to do all the important interviews because they're based out of St. Louis. And they're going out of their way to come here and film a movie in Arizona. So I wanted to crowdfund so I can get the movie released 6 months earlier. And that's what we're doing. So if you're wanting to spread some news and some cheer, I really need to raise another $12,000 to get this movie released this summer. And if we can get it raised, my mom's death anniversary is July 9th. The movie will be released on July 4th, 5 days before her 31st death anniversary. And I would really like that to happen. So you guys can help me.
Will you send me the links?
David, you donated a whole bunch of money and now you're on like the credits, aren't you?
Yeah. I did the $250 and I got on the credits. Yeah.
I saw that. The director saw that.
Yeah.
I love you for that. Thank you for
Of
that.
course. I love you and I want to be a part of this with you. I want you to be okay. And
Hopefully.
So if you will also send me the links, maybe to both of those things, like the petition and the crowdfunding, and I can put them in the show notes on our page and stuff when we release your show.
Sweet. Yes, I'll send those to you for sure. Thank you.
So I have watched every video that you have on TikTok like 1,200 times. I love them. I love everything about you. What I also love is your daddy. Every now and then you're able to catch him and he'll talk a little bit when he's working on his car or something. I love the whole house layout and the dogs and the land. And I love that you all have each other. And can you tell us a little bit about your dad? Because the most dangerous time for a domestic violence person is during the first 2 weeks that they're trying to escape. And that's what that phone call was with your father that night, was getting that escape plan.
Yeah, it was. He was always in love with my mom. And the night that she called, he had an empty house. Him and Betty had broke up. And Dad had just recently told me that Mom kept trying to come back to him too, but he kept having girlfriends. And that's why she never actually left Russell prior to. On this freaking night, my dad's girlfriend was gone. She calls complaining. And he says, come on back, Stace, load up the house. And she was ready to come back. My dad had a big house ready for her. And she was ready to make it happen again. And my dad has always felt robbed of it. And it is really hard to get him on camera talking about it. You could tell like he doesn't like to. I've asked to interview him. He says no. So I always got to catch him off guard and press record and then ask him a question and then chase him with the camera. I've caught him. I've done that a couple times. But he's very passionate about, and his story's never changed. And that's how I always knew I had something to contribute to this, because I grew up with my dad. And when the cops didn't want to question me for comment or interview, I was so upset because I've always known the truth. My dad's always been the motive for murder, and he's always felt jilted, and he's always hated Russell every day since.
My last question that I have for you, and I think it's something that we probably are all asking ourselves, is you are literally putting in blood, sweat, and tears with this, and it is constant daily. What do you do to also take care of yourself? What do you do to escape and just have a moment to be okay?
I film the best when I'm angry. Passion drives me here. This is why you guys watch me, is because it's raw and it's real. I have depression, and if you won't see me for 2 or 3 days, it's because I'm on my period, the depression's extra super bad, or something happened at work and I'm like going through a bad slump. TikTok is my therapy. That's where I go for my outlet for my anger. So I don't know, how do I get through it? This is what I do. I speak on it. And I didn't realize that I was holding all this trauma for 30 years until I started speaking on it for the past 2 years and started channeling my anger and not taking out on my boyfriend all the time and picking fights with my coworkers and shit like that. I'm trying to figure out where it needs to go. And I am mad at Russell Bennett Peterson, and I have been for 3 decades. And it's not just them. The last 2 years has really showed me that it's not just him. It's also the police department that has just failed her over and over again. So how do I get through it, David? I don't know. I talk to you.
I was just going to say, TikTok talking is almost like a modern form of journaling, right?
That, yes. Yes. Vlogging is, journalism. I always say that. I refer to myself as being my own journalist, but I also refer to this and talking to you as therapy.
We're always here for you. We are a safe place for you. And I admire the hell out of you. And this, when I say it, it'll probably sound a little silly too, so we can laugh, but it's also true. But if anything ever happens to me, you and this group of people, knowing that that you are on my side, I will be found. I will be found and I'll be good.
For real though.
Yeah, absolutely.
I say that all the
Well-
time. I say that all the time.
I think we just all need to stay away from anybody with the last name of Peterson. I think there's just too many. Make that your first red flag if in
Time
any
out.
dating.
Something that I've been thinking about too is, the police report ends, right? And then we skip ahead to 2020 when you pick up with the case file. But my question is, what did your life look like in between from when the police report ends to when you become involved and vocal about your mother's case?
All I could do was grow up, and my aunt was so passionate about this that I always thought that she would get something done. I never thought I was going to have to be in this chair right now talking to you. I always thought it was going to be her. And so when I hit 20s, I've had so much trauma. They want me to go to therapy. I finally shut therapy down, like when I'm old enough. No more therapy. My dad totally kept me sheltered because my mom was about to come back to him and he lost her. So I wasn't allowed to have a job or have a car, have my driver's license till I was 18. So I was very sheltered. So by 19, I'm finding drugs and I'm like, wow, drugs really help me sleep. They take away, they numb me. I find boys and drugs, and my early 20s, I don't even think about my mom anymore. And so what happens? You become a young adult. I start working. I don't think about my mom anymore. I don't even talk to my Aunt Wendy. She's just a figment of my imagination. She's something that happened and it's sad. I can't do anything about it. I just grow up. I live my life. I never thought I was capable or could do anything until 2020. So I just lived. I kept on living, not thinking that I was ever capable of doing anything. I'm just repeating myself because I'm all excited because I never thought I could be here today. I thought my aunt was going to do this, and it wasn't until I realized they weren't going to do anything that I knew I was going to do something. And even then I didn't know what to do. It was social media that gave me the key to this whole journey and kingdom.
And this is a totally different question here, but I myself enjoy to bake quite a bit. And your mother was a pastry chef.
Mm-hmm.
What was something that she loved to make and that you loved to eat of hers?
My aunt told me that she made chocolate mousse a bunch. And after she told me this, I remember my mom making that a bunch. But a core memory from my childhood, especially in the Sedona house, was at nighttime, she would make chocolate chip cookies. And me and my little sister would each get a beater. And it was great because it was cookie dough and we were allowed to eat the cookie dough. And it was the one little lick of cookie dough we can get. And it was the highlight of the evening because she'd always have something baking in the evening. And chocolate chip cookies and cookie dough are always a fond memory.
As Cindy mentioned before we started recording, your mother's favorite color, from what we understand, was green. So we also all wanted to wear green for you and your mother today. Even if it's just a gesture, it's something that we could do for you and your family.
Nikki, if you could give advice to anybody who's going through something similar, whether it's somebody who needs people to listen, or even somebody who's going through the tragic loss of a parent, what would be one or two pieces of advice that you would give to somebody?
With my video going viral with 9 million views, with I am a daughter of a murdered woman, I have had beyond the outreach of I am a daughter or I am a son. Everybody has a story. Oh, it's overwhelming. And everybody's got the story. And I tell them that you could do what I did. It takes a camera and a case file and just passion. I am not a smart person. I didn't know what to do. All I did was reach out for help, and a lot of people just directed me, and I was like a boat going down a river, and you guys were the river. So if you want to do what I do, I can help you. I could be your guidebook like Sarah was for me. Just follow in my footsteps and DM me, and I'll help you any step of the way that I can, because I know you. I know what it's like to have that first year and have no one listen to you and no one believe you, and all you are is a hysterical family member with a case file and no media. I know what that's. Oh my God, it's horrible. I see you, I know you, and I hear you, so call me.
And to piggyback off that a little bit, so now that your mother's case is getting more attention and more TikTok podcasts and all that are picking it up, do you find that people are still reaching out to you as much as you had liked versus reading the story on news outlets and then reporting the story? And do you find that there's misinformation being spread about your mother's case?
That's an answer it would have been different 3 weeks ago. I wouldn't have known how to really answer that because everybody's been so amazing in collaborating with me on my mom's case. And she's gotten no media. All the media is because I begged, borrowed, and stole for it. Until just recently, there was a famous YouTuber that did do some research down my TikTok channel. He clearly did some Google research. He read the Red Rock News articles, and he decided to release a story without collaborating or getting comment from the family. I was very humbled at first to have a great big person cover my mom's story because he got me 10,000 new followers. But what he also did was put his own little 2 cents in there, as well as the suspects version, which I get is going to be out there. But now I'm battling the misinformation like you just brought up, because my mom never held the gun. I have the evidence in the medical examiner's report. Once again, are you going to believe the suspect? Or are you going to believe the medical professional? And yeah, the misinformation has been really difficult, especially the last 3 weeks. So I know that more is going to come. Sarah told me to prepare myself for this. This was my first little taste of it. And it sucked.
That's why we definitely wanted to do our episode the way that we've done it, is because there will be speculations. There will be people creating narratives. And I even messaged you and I was like, I can see how that can happen by reading this freaking police report. And so that's why we wanted to do it this way, because we wanted to have those speculations that other people probably have. And then you come on and be like, no, let's set the record straight. I know that's hard, but one thing I always try to remind myself is what Taylor Swift said: even bad publicity is good publicity.
But you're doing it the right way, David. Like you just said, you're bringing the family on, you're speculating, you're doing both sides of the story. The man never called me for comment or question. He just binged my TikTok channel and ran with it. And I was like, okay. He made my life entertaining. Instead of working with me and trying to spread awareness, he made my life entertainment.
I'm glad that you were able to collaborate with Sarah Turney, so you had someone to lean on and you weren't isolated in that first instance and hopefully the last instance.
We should give props to Sarah Turney too, just because she was the person who started that whole, I don't want to say like trend, but she's the one who started that, like bringing the attention to her sister's case and getting.
Can you think of somebody else that was before her? Like
she was the one.
TikTok and fucking
she
ran
did it.
with it.
She did it. And then she actually, unfortunately, did not receive the justice that was deserved in that case. But at the same time, we know what happened to her sister.
We always talk about that we have to revise the criminal justice system, mostly is when we're talking about racial equity and things like that. But it's more than just that, obviously, because when a victim's family can't get information that they need, cannot get closure on cases, we all respect police officers when they're doing good. But there is so much that it's just built into the system of things. That's how they're supposed to work. And it always seems to favor the criminal versus the victim. And that's something that we need to work on. At this point, with our whole justice system, I feel like we just need to scratch it and start all over. You should be able to get everything that you need on your mom's case just from being her daughter, regardless of anything else.
Nikki, your story is just all the work that you're putting in and everything you're doing with your aunt. And I'm just so glad that you do have that support, because I can't even imagine this process for you.
Thank you. I couldn't do it without you guys. I wouldn't be here. So thank you.
I wonder how many times Nikki just wants to go outside and just scream into the void, or God knows what is that physical outlet. But
all the time, and I usually get on and I make a fool out of myself with you guys.
We'll take it. But Nikki, I just wanted to thank you so much for trusting us to want to share your story and your mom's story. You said your anger and passion translates on camera, but they can't be easy rehashing every time. So we truly do appreciate that you trust us, and trust David that he wouldn't lead you into the wolf's den or anything. We greatly appreciate both of you, and I'm sure I can speak for the group here that we hope justice happens for your mother. We want to see justice happen for your mother. and we will do whatever we can to see that justice does happen for your mother.
Thank you.
We need to shout it from the rooftops as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of different states covered to shout from. We'll shout from all the different regions that we cover.
I know that
And we're loudmouths kind of too.
My kind of people.
I know that
I was
we're
trying
getting
to say that
close
nicely, Cindy.
I just want to say, Nikki, this past year following you has been so inspirational. You have supported me and my show and believed in me, and even through your time of trying to get justice for your mom, you still remember to give shout outs to the people that love and support you. And I just really admire that about you. Like when I logged in, what was it, yesterday, and I was like, she made a TikTok about me. Like, what? She has time to think about me. My heart melts every time I look down and you've messaged me. I just admire you. I'm a friend of yours. I'm a fan of yours. And I love you. And thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. You got me weepy, David. You've been a big inspiration because you're one of the first ones. Like, you were one of the first ones that picked up my story before I went real viral, had millions of views. I only had a couple 100,000 on that first video when you found me. And I attribute the first dozen podcasts to the ones that really care. Really do. And David was one of those first ones that I had no media. I'm just a hysterical family member, and he took 2 hours out of his life and he bonded with me in such a way that created this relationship that now I am forever and always in love. I have a crush on David. So yes, I will always go out of my way to promote David because he took hours to listen to me bawl, and this was so relatable, and he has his own horrible story, and look at how happy and perky he is. If David can get through it, I can get through it. And like, I just love him. So thank you.
I'm keeping this recording
and to hear
forever.
stuff like that, I get really.
You're very welcome.
I'm all weepy. Thank you, David. I love hearing stuff like that. I need to hear it more, and it's crazy that I've become inspirational because some days I don't even like to hear myself speak. So thank you.
We love you.
And now you have another group of people that will not stop bothering you.
Sharing videos. Yep.
Sharing videos, absolutely. We're in your corner, and sorry to the whole group that I'm speaking for us, but you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Thank you again for spending this time with us. I don't think I have the words to share how much it truly means that not only did you agree to come on with us, but it was an enthusiastic absolutely. So.
Of course, always.
David, if you could grab those links from Nikki, and we will make sure that we share those everywhere we can. So thank you so much, Nikki. And this has been a very special episode of Speculating Wildly About Crime.
I am so honored. This was such a fun group. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you, Nikki. We love you.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our show today. We ask you to please subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else that you find your favorite podcasts, just so you don't miss out on any of our episodes. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at SWAC Pod, SWACPOD, or you can contact us via email for questions, comments, or case ideas. Our email address is swacpod@gmail.com. That's SWACPOD@gmail.com. Thanks so much for speculating wildly with us tonight.